أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هل أتاك حديث الغاشية؟ وجوه يومئذ خاشية عاملة ناصبة تصلى نار هامية تسقى من عين آنية ليس لهم طعام إلا من ضريع لا يسمن ولا يغني من جوع وجوه يومئذ ناعمة لسعيها راضية في جنة عالية لا تسمع فيها لاغية فيها عين جارية فيها سرر مرفوعة وأكواب موضوعة ونمارق مصفوفة وزرابي مبثوثة أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت وإلى السماء كيف رفعت وإلى الجبال كيف نصبت وإلى الأرض كيف سطحت فذكر إنما أنت مذكر لست عليهم بمسيطر إلا من تولى وكفر فيعذبه الله العذاب الأكبر إن إلينا إيابهم ثم إن علينا حسابهم صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Thank you so much, Mariam, for the beautiful recitation. Now today we are really privileged to have with us Sheikh Zoheir Esmail. So if you can please welcome him with the salawat.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Assalamu alaikum everybody. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to stand here again as part of a Time for Change program. I think it has been about 2 years since I was here last for a more kind of informal, interactive question and answer. I think it was in the month of Ramadan, something like that. So I'm very, very grateful to be here again and to be able to present some content for you all. The topic of the discussion that I want to look into today for the next half an hour is of mindfulness. Now, who has heard of mindfulness? I expect everyone's hand to go up because mindfulness has become a very popular tool, a popular intervention, if you like, in the mental health space. And it is such a versatile tool that you will find discussions of mindfulness to be for the general public. You'll find people coming into businesses and teaching about mindfulness, especially when it comes to, emotional well-being, emotional intelligence, and things like that. And mindfulness in itself, like I said, is a very important tool. And there are a number of components to it that are key. The first thing is that mindfulness is present orientated. That means that someone who is mindful is not thinking about the past and is not thinking about the future. They are present within the very moment. And it is that presence within the moment that allows them to access what is going on within their very being. Because they are not thinking ahead to the future and worrying about the future, because they are not consumed with what has happened in the past, they are now able to center themselves in the present, and the present-orientated approach allows them, therefore, to be, the second word, receptive. Receptive to how they feel in the moment, receptive to what they really think about the moment, and perhaps something more. Receptive and connected to those things that are not necessarily subsumed in the realm of thought. Sometimes a person is able to be in the moment. And that, for many people, has become something very liberating. Being consumed in worries, thoughts, and problems, and being able then to pause that onslaught of thinking has helped many people to be able to just be, to just exist and absorb the very real clarity that comes with being able to just be attuned with the moment. And so therefore, the tool of mindfulness is something that is encouraged from a very young age as well. So you'll find even when you send your children to primary school, they might have an extra club, right, which will teach them about how to be mindful. I have a 5-year-old daughter. She learned about breathing techniques at school. And it's very useful for me because when she's having a tantrum, I tell her, take a deep breath, and I do breathing exercises with her, and it actually helps her to calm down. So this is a very useful, practical tool that has been, if you like, presented to the public. Now, the question is that where did this practice come from? In the history of how it came about in the West, it came about through drawing on the Zen Buddhist tradition. And the Zen Buddhist tradition has been a very useful tradition because of a secular outlook to life. Okay? You don't have to subscribe to any theological doctrines, okay, or any kind of existential or ontological ideas to practice mindfulness. And so therefore it is a practice that can easily be, if you like, given to all kinds of people. And of course you'll find some people that are critical of that will say, if it doesn't have a religious basis, then why are Muslims using it? I get asked, is meditation, are we allowed to do it? Okay? Is it haram, for example, to take out time in your day to sit 5 minutes and to do breathing exercises and just be in the moment? Now, of course, that insecurity is something that is born from the way we interact with religion in general. If we feel like we always have to have some kind of authority explaining to us that this is allowed and this is not allowed for practices that are of benefit to the human being. So that's on the one hand. But on the other hand, is there any practice within the Muslim tradition that mirrors the technique of mindfulness? Now, I remember when before I went to Qum, and before I went on my journey of studies, I used to read a lot of books on mysticism. Okay, it was like my favorite thing. Sayyid Hussein Nasr was like the king at that time because so many books were coming out, and he was, and the Ansarian books, they were not producing as many books on mysticism. Perhaps they've caught up with some books now, but those were your kind of main sources. You had Ansarian bookshops in Iran, and you had these publications, academic publications, mostly from State University of New York Press. And I remember I was looking at a book, it was called Kernel of the Kernel. It's a very old book. And in that book, there was a statement. which said, it was a statement from a well-known, recently passed away scholar, Muhammad Hussein Tahrani, Ayatollah Muhammad Hussein Tahrani. He said that Muraqabah, okay, which I'm going to translate for you as watchfulness. So the word Muraqabah comes from being watchful over something. So someone who is, is a supervisor, okay, they will have the word associated with them comes from this same root. Or for example, someone who's looking after children, okay, carer that's looking after children, from the same word. So Muraqabah means to be watchful. He said that Muraqabah is the most important spiritual practice, which is a very significant thing to say, because we know there are lots of spiritual practices. There's prayers, there's fasting, there's going for Hajj, right? There's remembering Allah. We have in the Quran, وَلَذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. What do you mean? وَالْمُرَاقَبَةُ أَكْبَرُ. Of course, right? So it's a very significant statement for a person to say. Obviously, at that time, I paid absolutely no attention to it. It was just one of the many plethora of information that I just picked up along the way. But as I went into the field of mysticism, and as I more and more became acquainted with the practice of the mystics to understand how they try and develop their connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I realized the importance of what Allama Tahrani was saying. At the very heart of spiritual progression is self-awareness. Now, of course, you can't be aware of yourself if you're thinking about the past. You can't be aware of yourself in the moment. And you can't be aware of yourself if your mind is occupied with the future. In order to be aware of yourself, you must be aware of yourself moment by moment. Now, that doesn't mean that understanding your past can't help you be aware of your moment. But the actual practice of self-awareness is to be watchful over your own state and your own presence moment by moment. Okay? So Muraqabah is a practice that is a traditional practice within the Muslim world, okay, that can be likened to the practice of mindfulness. But there is something about the way Muslims deal with these issues that adds an extra layer than what we find generally from a secular perspective. And the reason is very simple. The reason is that our concepts are intertwined with some kind of theological background and idea. So our practices then fit into an integrated system, okay, of what the human being is supposed to be doing. So a person is mindful, or a person practices muraqabah, not simply to just be aware of their moment. There is a purpose to being aware of their moment. It is not only to calm their mind. There is a purpose behind calming their mind. And of course, that purpose is seeking the proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now this word, closeness to Allah, what does it mean? We're all trying to be close to Allah. What does it mean? What do you mean trying to be close to Allah? Or I dedicate my life to being close to Allah. Or every day I try to become closer to Allah. What does it mean? Anyone want to say anything? Well, look, it's not physical, is it? When I say, okay, I'm going closer to the chairs, easy. How can I go closer to Allah? Where is Allah that I go closer to Him? When I say I want to go closer to something, it has to be there and I have to be here and I have to make some directional movement towards it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does He have a place or a direction? He doesn't have a place or direction. So what does it mean for a person to get closer to Allah? If Allah is closer to you than your jugular vein, then how can you get closer to Him? Becoming closer to Allah is removing the layers of what we call ghafla. Another word they say are the veils that separate us from the realization of His very presence that is already within us. It is like, there's a story, very interesting one from Rumi. He says, there was a man who was seeking treasure. Okay? And everywhere he went, he had a box. He would go to a place, let's say he went to China, he would go, he would put the box down, he would sit on the box or stand on the box and seek treasure. Then he would go to secluded caves, he'd look there and seek treasure. And then he would go to another place, seek treasure. But he would constantly have this box. One day, somebody asked him, what's this box you carry around all the time? He said, I don't know. The person said to him, what's inside it? He said, I don't know what's inside it. He said, well, you know, you're carrying this box around, you don't know what it is, you don't know what's inside it. Why don't you open it and take a look? So he opens it and takes a look. And what does he find inside? Finds treasure. The thing that he's searching for and looking for everywhere else, that he's making long journeys to try and find. How do I get closer to Allah? Let's say that's the treasure. I'll go to this class, I'll go, you know, on this program, I'll go for Hajj, I'll go for Umrah, I'll go here, I'll go there. At the very core of it, he was sitting on the treasure. All he needed to do is look inside the box. And that is the very example of human beings. So the purpose of mindfulness is to look inside of our being, to witness within the very beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation in something that we can actually comprehend. When we look around the world, we can only comprehend things on a very surface level. For example, this pillar here, you can understand what its shape is and what its color is, what its texture is, and so on and so forth. You can only understand material things about that, other things. The only being that you can understand in depth is yourself. You can understand your thoughts. You can understand your emotions. You can understand your past. You can understand your present. But you can also understand a lot more than that. You can understand your divine imprint. You can understand what gifts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put within your very being. And you can't do this with anything else. You can't do this with any external object. Your faculties are given to you to understand your within. Even your understanding of the external experience. The external experiences give you information and understandings and concepts with which you can look within. So the concept of muraqabah in Islam is to move beyond your mindfulness in the moment and in the time, and to start to see the playing out of your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in each and every moment and each and every time. When you find yourself present in a moment, okay? When you find yourself present, but you find yourself detached. See, you're present, but you don't know what you feel. You're present, but you can't really see God there. It just seems perhaps like some type of emptiness or some kind of void, or maybe something that makes no sense at all. Okay? That witnessing of that emptiness and that void is sometimes our inability to understand the different states with which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us with. Sometimes the emptiness is itself the connection. And sometimes it is not like that. Sometimes when you introspect, you can see the connection. So the idea here is that the human being, if they build the practice of mindfulness, what they will find is that what is within their being fluctuates. It changes. Sometimes it is silence, sometimes it is presence. Sometimes it is love, sometimes it is confusion. Sometimes it is connection, sometimes it's disconnection. And this is essentially one of the aspects and functions of the heart. The heart, the word qalb, it comes from fluctuation. It is not in a permanent state. It is something that continues to change. And I used to ask myself this. I used to ask myself, why is the qalb in flux? And I think the reason is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presents differently. Sometimes with that quietude. They call that qabd, kind of constriction. And sometimes with plentitude. And they call that bust or a widening. So, understanding what muraqabah is, understanding the place of muraqabah in spiritual development, enables us then to take this concept that we are all familiar with, that we all see the benefit of, okay? Because mindfulness certainly has a lot of benefit, okay? We take that process and we are able to elevate it to the very core of what it means to connect consistently and constantly. And now when I bring you back to the idea of the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay? The remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala occurs where? It occurs within, okay? If we are constantly aware of that connection and of that remembrance, then we are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a consistent and constant manner. So when we have وَلَذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ, it doesn't conflict with muraqabah being the most important practice. Because it is through your awareness of yourself and through the awareness of your soul that you are then able to be aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You all know which hadith I'm going for right now. مَنْ عَرَفَ نَفْسَهُ فَقَدْ عَرَفَ رَبَّهُ. The one who knows or is cognizant of themselves. What does that mean? Is that an intellectual cognizance? Is it that I know the traits of my personality and therefore I know God? Or is it that the one that is in touch, the one that is aware, the one that can observe the waves and phases of their soul, the one that sees the way their soul connects to the existence that is all around them, the one that perceives everything around them through the lens of the Almighty, is the one who knows their Lord. There are different ways of looking at the same hadith, but that hadith has those levels of depth that we are able to see that the more we comprehend our nature, the better then we are able to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the question now is how? Good, thank you so much for that theoretical picture of how nice it can be, okay? Because the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what will give each and every human being peace. Why do I say that? Ala bi-dhikrillahi tatma'innal qulub. With the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the hearts come to peace. And if the heart is at peace, the person is at peace. And one of the most valuable things we can pick up in this very short life is peace. To find that peace within, okay, that is a stable peace. A peace that is stable because it's connected to something that is stable, not to something that is changing. Okay, so many times we seek peace in things that are changing. We might seek peace watching Netflix. But how long can we watch Netflix for? Even if we have all day to watch Netflix, we'll get bored, right? Some of us will get bored, okay? You can find peace with family and friends, but will family and friends have the time to always remain with you? No, they've got lives to lead. They've got places to go. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does He have another place to be? Because He's everywhere. He doesn't have another place to be because He's everywhere. His attention is not diverted from one thing to another. The value of the relationship that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so great. It is something that is endowed to human beings, which is not given easily to other creations. Okay? So how do we get to this point where, we are able to take muraqabah as a continual and constant practice? What do you guys think? They asked me if I wanted to do an interactive session. I'm glad I said no. Because the path is through practice. It's as simple as that. Anything you want to achieve in this life, it is about consistent practice. If you want to be intelligent, consistently study. If you want to be good at sports, consistently good at go to training. Yeah? If you want to be good at anything in life, you have to have a manageable, consistent plan. So the way to attain a high level of muraqabah is to start practicing it. Just do it. Stop looking for how and why and what about and what's the preventative measure. You are sitting on the treasure. You just have to look inside. It is not overcomplicated. And even the mystics don't think it's overcomplicated. In mystical programs, they do not tell you to do something that you don't know what to do. They just tell you to do it consistently. So for example, let me give you an example. A mystical program of the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be, for example, this recitation at this time, this recitation at this time, this recitation at that time. What is it? It is just a constant series of remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you get the consistency, then you have to make sure you get the quality. How many people here play sports still? Good amount of people. How many go to the gym? Quite a few, right? The most important thing about playing sports, going to the gym, is very simple. Turn up. The second thing is the quality of the training. If you turn up to play a sport, okay, but you play against someone who's not as good as you, you won't get better at that sport. If you want to train for the sport, you have to play with someone who's better than you. Your coach has to be better than you. If you go to the gym and you don't do progressive overload, which means you don't push higher and higher weights, you won't improve. Okay, you will just remain stagnant. So in the same way, the program of muraqabah is to first try and get a consistent remembrance to do it. Okay? I have an Apple Watch. Every morning, it tells me take a breath. It's fantastic. Every single morning, it tells me, how about a minute to meditate? Sometimes I'm on my way to drop the kids, yeah, because that's part of my job. Drop the kids, my watch beeps, take a minute to meditate. So I do it. Yeah? Sometimes even the small things like that with modern technology and things like that help us. Okay? If I say to myself every time, before or after my salah, I'm going to take a few moments to do muraqabah. I don't know how that looks. I don't know how great it will be, but at least I consistently go ahead and do it. Okay? Some people will do it on the hour, for example. It's difficult for people maybe to remember on the hour, but some people will do something like that. Whatever works for you is the right way. That's the right way to do it. Once you start and you start to become consistent, what you will realize is that the quality will come. The quality of it will come. As long as you're consistently turning up, the quality of the muraqabah will start to increase. And alongside that, alongside the actual practice, furthering your understanding of the connection between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and us through understanding religious teachings is extremely important. There is a very important treatise written by Sayyid Bahr al-Ulum. It's called Risala Sayr wa Suluk. In that treatise, he talks about various stages. But to cut it short for you, to move from the stage of, to move to the stage of practice, okay, you first have to get through the stage of understanding. Al-Ghazali as well, when he talks about relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, a person can only rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala truly if they have been taught through a teacher who can explain to them why they should rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They need to understand Allah's power. They need to understand His wisdom. They need to understand His compassion. They need to understand the way He works in the world. Okay? They need to understand His intimate connection. All of these things, if these have not been fully comprehended, it is very hard then to push into the realm of practice. So it is practicing to the extent of your knowledge, it is seeking further knowledge, and then it is super adding the further knowledge to the teachings. And that is the way that we move consistently forward with the practices that we'd like to inculcate. Muraqabah is an extremely important practice. And for Muslimin, the main thing that we want to do is nourish our souls as much as possible. And if you're nourishing second by second, what's better than that? You're not going to get any further, right? There's very few things that you can do to super add that. If you are going to be working on your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala each and every moment, that is a beautiful life to lead. But it is a goal. It is a place to get to. Just like a marathon runner, right? You don't go and run a marathon straight away. First go to train. You got to learn how to run a few kilometers. Then you get to your first 5 kilometers, then 10 kilometers, then longer, then your half marathon. But you don't do it just like that either. To go from 5 kilometers to 10 kilometers, you have to run lots of 5 kilometers, right? Lots of 10 kilometers. The same thing is with all religious practices. And once we understand what muraqabah is, we will also be able to feed in the other religious practices. When you stand in jama'ah, when the imam is saying the two surahs at the beginning, what are you supposed to do? Why can't you be mindful at that time? The dhikr that you're supposed to recite, why can't you be present while you make that dhikr during the Jamaat prayer? If mindfulness becomes a habit, you will find thousands of places in which it intersects with the very real practices that we have. So that's my time. I promised I wouldn't go even a minute above 30. So inshallah, thank you so much for listening. I hope it's of benefit. If there are any questions, I'm happy. Sure. Also switch this off.
Wants to start? You always do it. Okay, thank you, Sheikh. Thank you so much. You're away with that.
Yeah. We've just had 2 hours of Islamic psychology, so I think that's the reason why. Thank you so much, Sheikh Zoheir. Thank you. Just few announcements. Yeah, our next program will be on Friday, 3rd of October, and it's going to be a Quran discussion circle. Can't remember what the other announcements was. Yes, can you just please recite the Surah Al-Fatiha for all marhumin and all the people who are suffering in the world? Al-Fatiha. Tea and refreshments will be served in the dining room. I'm sure you all know where the dining room is. And we'd kindly appreciate any donations towards Time for Change. So there's a card machine, QR code, cash donation box, you name it, it's all there. So we'd really appreciate that. So thank you very much. And we'll pray Isha now.